Hello, and glad you could join me one more time. It's wonderful glad you could join me one more time. Recently, I was reading an article posted on NPR, and I like to scroll through the headlines, see if anything catches my attention. And this particular one caught my attention. It's the article is Bernie Sanders is drawing record crowds as he pushes Democrats to fight oligarchy. And this led me to wonder, okay, just what is an oligarchy? What is he talking about? So I looked into it, and I draw this from Andrew Edgar and Peter Sedgwick's Cultural Theory, the Key Concepts, and this was published in 1999. And he tells us that Aristotle had proposed three types of government. And from these three types came all these other various types of government. But essentially, they come from these three main types of government, which is a monarchy, which is ruled by one person. The second is an aristocracy ruled by a few people. And then the last being a democracy ruled by many people. And in the idea of democracy, it is all based on, well, we'll get into the democracy aspect in a moment here. But what I want to share with you is these ideas here. And from these three basic ideas or three basic types of governing people came the idea of checks and balances. And the purpose of these checks and balances was to prevent the government from degrading or becoming a government that is based upon some form of tyrannical style of rule, such as an aristocracy or a totalitarian type of government. And not aristocracy, autocracy. And the oligarchy falls under this type of tyrannical style of rule. Actually, it falls more under the idea of aristocracy, meaning ruled by a few. So, as Mr. Sanders is putting it, an oligarchy is a small group of people who have control over an organization, or in our case, the government. So, what does that mean for those of us who are concerned? Well, consider the independent agencies that were established by former presidents and Congress. And these independent agencies were tasked with overseeing the powers that be, or rather, overseeing the branches of government and key offices with the purpose of preventing one from overpowering the other or from stepping out of their purview. And as you can see, well, I shouldn't say as you can see, not everybody reads the news, not everybody is interested in the news, but the important thing about this is that the government, the presidential house, is in the process of dismantling these independent agencies that are tasked with overseeing key aspects of our government, meaning that the purpose of these independent agencies is to protect us from them. And I don't like this concept of us versus them. And this is not really an us versus them type situation. It's more along the lines of the rule of government moving beyond the traditional confines of what has been put into place. So one of the things that he said was that our government is becoming an oligarchy of billionaires. Now, the thing we have to keep in mind with this, now, most people do not like capitalism. But then again, most people don't understand what capitalism is or what its role is. And, well, which is competition as a means of controlling the value or price of goods, meaning that the purpose of capitalism is to prevent any one organization or company from charging exorbitant prices. That's the idea behind this. Of course, we know that that concept has fallen apart. But we have to understand that capitalism has existed in a variety of ways from the development of civilization as a whole. It may have began through bartering, but as currency was introduced into civilization long before all of this, I should say, prehistoric times. And prehistoric times are those events that occur before history was written, or actually before the written language was developed. Because once the written language was developed, we have a history. But before it was developed, it is considered prehistory. So the idea of capitalism, while it hasn't been written down in stone or tablet or papyrus or scroll, has been around since the beginning of civilization. And capitalism plays an important role because as capitalism evolved, we also discovered that there must be a constant flow of labor. And in order to produce these goods, people have to be there. And this is what led to the institution of labor being provided through compensation as a wage. And when the large companies began acquiring the smaller companies, well, then capitalism became something else. It was no longer a means of controlling price, but it became a means of, you know what? I got that all wrong. I got that completely wrong. Because as the corporations began buying up smaller corporations, this whole idea of competition, prices being controlled through competition, began to disappear. And what we have now is corporate capitalism, because now it is corporate companies, corporations, mega corporations that actually control the cost of a lot of our goods through a variety of means. In the early part of the 19th century, I should say in the 1800s and early 1900s, as it transitioned, these small producers were bought up by larger producers, And eventually we come to know what we know today as mega producers. And you can check this out from Sven Beckert and Christine Deson's American Capitalism, New Histories. And this was published in 2018. These are valuable sources of information and such. And I'm not just going to spout stuff off. I want you to know where I get my information from, how I build and develop these ideas that I spew forth. So, continuing with this, these mega corporations that we have today became what they are through our legislation. The members of the legislative branch, meaning congressmen, began their service. Well, I shouldn't say all of them. Many of them began their service in Congress with deep pockets. Those that weren't are often beholden to those with deeper pockets than they. And then when they return to the private sector, they have even deeper pockets when it's all over with. But that's neither here nor there. The idea is that while this would not be an issue in general, if they had upheld the obligation to the people of the country, we wouldn't have these mega corporations. There's a reason why we are often referred to as corporate America, because the government does not necessarily run the show. It is the corporations that run the show. And I don't know enough about the lobbying process and the whole purpose of lobbying to even comment on it. So let's just keep it I will keep it within what I know and can guide you towards verifying information, or you can expand your information on your own. My purpose is not to give you everything, but just to give you something to think about and encourage you to look into this stuff. So what about the conservatives? The conservatives play a huge role in what's happening with us. So what about them? I asked this question several months ago, and when I ask questions, I go looking for answers. And the way I went looking for answers in this particular instance was that I purchased an online course. I purchased an introduction to political science. I purchased this class through Udemy, Udemy. And I'm sure the address is popping up here. So I encourage you to look into this platform, this online learning platform. So far, what I have learned from them, from those instructors, and I've purchased several classes, has been useful. So here's an idea about the conservatives. And just for the record, I'm not a conservative. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I am independent. Thus, conservatives are typically those people who hold on to traditional and cultural values, and they resist change. Now, change is a fundamental aspect of nature. Everything in nature changes. Therefore, everything else is going to change. It's just the way everything flows. Continuing, conservatives are interested in religion, family, and nation. And this is fantastic. This is great. What may create a problem is that they don't necessarily promote mainstream religion, because mainstream religion and traditional religion are not the same. Mainstream religion is more flexible in their interpretation of doctrine and biblical teachings, whereas traditional religion is less so. Think of Pharisees and Sadducees in the New Testament. One group was strictly a fundamental mindset, while the other group was a little more flexible. And to be honest, I get the two confused. So I can't tell you which is which. What I can tell you is that consider a concordance, or, you can always look it up online through a search engine and determine what is the difference between a Sadducee and a Pharisee. But anyway, let's move forward with this. Mainstream religion is more inclined to accept people of other ethnic backgrounds, more likely to accept people who have differing views of sexuality. Mainstream religion is more likely to accept those people who choose different lifestyles, who choose to be different, whereas traditional religion, not so much. They want to apply a more fundamental practice of the biblical teachings. So you could see how one is more flexible, one is more rigid. Mainstream religion is more progressive, whereas traditional religion, well, we could say is regressive, but stagnant would be the proper term. And also, one of the other things about the conservative mindset is they do not like change. They oppose change. Their concept is, if this is working, it does not need to be improved. This is fine. Leave it alone. They don't care about efficiency. They care about following the particular steps. This is the way it's been done. This is the way it will always be done. No changes, none whatsoever. The traditional concept is God is unchanging, remains the same forever. The mainstream concept is that God is ever expanding, ever forgiving. There's a key word, forgiving. So let's move into a different aspect of conservatism, such as neo-conservatism or ultra-conservatism. I'm not sure which is which. But anyway, they added on top of this belief of traditional values, traditional religion, traditional family, traditional nation, they added to all of this that now the United States has a responsibility to intervene in other nations to spread their version of democracy. And they feel that they have a right to do this. And the way they do this is through aggressive policies, which is exactly what we are seeing with the current administration. And these aggressive policies tend to create resentment, discordance. Hey, that's something that we're seeing here. There has also been a lot said about the idea of democracy being threatened, which it may very well be threatened, because democracy is built upon the idea of the vote, the idea of everybody voting on particular items, people. Now, our type of democracy is a representational democracy, meaning that we vote to have people represent our needs. So this is how we have the House of Representatives and the Senate and the president. We elect these people in these two branches. Congress is two branches. Congress is the House of Representatives and the Senate, and that's the legislature, and then the executive branch, which is the president. Those are elected by us. Well, the president more indirectly, because they've got this electoral vote, and I really have not looked into that. I probably should, but I haven't looked into that yet. There are other concerns troubling me presently. So, democracy does not equal Democrats. It has nothing to do with it. Democracy is all about representation through votes. Now, the Democratic Party, from my understanding, would fall in line more with the idea of a liberal democracy, because the Democratic Party is built upon a philosophy of liberalism. Now, don't think liberalism is a dirty word, because it's not. Our country was founded on liberalism. Believe it or not, our country was founded on liberalism. And the philosophy of liberalism is about the preservation of liberty and freedom. And this idea of liberty and freedom rests with the individual. It rests with the individual. The individual is free to pursue the lifestyle they feel best suits them, as long as they do not intrude upon another's lifestyle. Now, that's, for us, that could be considered a new concept, because that is not what's happening. Because we have the traditional religious group dictating to those others who choose a lifestyle that best suits them. They are telling us, no, you cannot do that. You can't live like that. You have to live like me and be like the rest of us. You have to conform to me. And that's not liberty. That's not freedom. This liberal concept is about equality and the idea that people are intelligent enough to rule themselves, to manage themselves. Now, equality, that was always problematic, even more so now, and with all the policies that were to promote diversity, equality, inclusion, have all been tossed out the window. All that's been dismantled. And that's concerning. I have a disability. I have a cognitive disability. Therefore, I am now to be considered not useful. I have all of these people now who are prejudiced against me. And it's okay. They're actually encouraged to be like that. Actually encouraged to be like that. The interesting thing with all of these ideas and everything is that if you take the concept of normality, anybody who does not fall into that grouping of normality can be considered operating from a position of a disability. Sociopaths, their whole purpose is power. Power is what drives them. And they have no concept. They don't understand emotions. Technically, they're operating from a position of a disability. Psychopaths, they're destructive. They can't help it. Now, I'm not talking about psychopathic behavior or sociopathic behavior, which can be attributed to conditioning or environmental conditions. I'm talking about those people who are born inherently like that, who are predisposed to that. They all are existing in a position of disability. Now, that's carrying it to some extremes, but that's the idea. Someone with a disability does not fall into this normal grouping, this grouping of normality. We don't fall into that. Let's get back to this idea here, because the idea of the liberal Democrat, and that's a good term to describe them, liberal Democrats, because they are more about the people than they are about religion and business. Let's call it business, because that's what it's all about. Business. That's what the nation runs on, is businesses. And then there's the military and everything. They're more they're based on a philosophy that's more than that. But as this evolved, as it's developed, so came the idea that the government has a responsibility to assist people through social programs, even when the people do not believe that they need this assistance. It is because of this liberal thinking that we have Social Security. It is because of this liberal thinking that we have a means to assist people who are caught between jobs, in a manner of speaking, not necessarily to provide them as to become a means of living, but to aid them in their survival. And again, that's a liberal thought. Survival. Woo. And why we have healthcare programs, Medicaid, Medicare, this is why we have those programs. These programs are not part of the conservative mindset. As far as the conservative mindset is concerned, you either make it or you don't. Sink or swim. That's it. Now, mind you, again, I'm drawing a lot of this information from that introductory course I purchased on political science. Now, this just gives an introduction to various ideas. Now, ideology is, well, let's look at what ideology is real quick here, which is a system of ideas, especially those that form the basis of economic and political theory. Or you could say it's the ideas, or rather a manner of thinking that is characteristic of a person or a group or social class, however you want to put that. But, I like to refer to the individual. So it describes a manner of thinking of the individual or how you think. There you go. That's ideology. And that's what this course offered, was some basic concepts of the ideology of these people who participate in voting. And this is geared towards those people who participate in the process, those people who vote. Those people who choose not to vote, they have essentially given their power away. Period. But, that is just my opinion there. So let me come back to this again. Now, another term I feel that must be introduced and clarified, well, nobody's really talked about this except on these social platforms like Facebook and such, and that is bullying. What is bullying? It's defined as a systemic abuse of power. And this comes from Morrison's School Bullying and Restorative Justice. This was an article. And now, power, you have the bully who abuses power, but what is power? Power is the ability to influence others. So you could say that the abuse of power is the imposition of one's ideas or an organization's ideas or a government's ideas upon others. And with this basic definition here, we can see how bullying works across the globe, because everything that is going on here, it's not isolated to us. This is a global concern. And this, I believe, is how we should view this, as a global concern. Therefore, I agree with Mr. Sanders in the continuing development of an elected oligarchy. Elected oligarchy. This just didn't happen. This just did not happen. A majority of the voters in the United States wanted this. And when you understand that, we have to sit back, because when I saw these results, I stood back and took it all in. It was the majority of the people asked for what is happening now. Asked for what is happening now. Now, one thing I have to say about Mr. Trump, he did tell us that he would end the war with Israel and Palestine. He didn't tell us how. And then when he proposed that the United States take over the Gaza Strip and deport all of the Palestinians, now we have to keep in mind that Mr. Vance said that there were no such thing as Palestinians as far as he was concerned. We have to keep that in mind. So those people who empowered him, because that's what we're doing, we are empowering leaders through our votes. We give them a little bit of our power. So those people who empowered him to do this, which, a lot of them, from what I read, a lot of them live in Dearborn, Michigan. And, they were vastly disappointed, horribly disappointed. And we're seeing this in other areas as well. So, yes, there is a continuing development of an elected oligarchy. And while the legislature is typically composed of wealthy people, there are those who are even more wealthy invading our form of democracy, meaning our form of appointing representatives for ourselves. After all, it was clearly indicated that if people did not vote the way they were supposed to vote according to the president's agenda, then this other person would bring their power to bear on them. So these invaders are essentially disenfranchising the voters. Those people dismantling these organizations that were approved, developed by Congress, legally put into place, are being disenfranchised by them. The way they are dismantling all of this is essentially telling you that you are nothing. You do not matter. And all of those sitting in the legislature who are in agreement with this are also saying you are not valued to them. And this is whether they are a Republican representative or a Democratic representative. When these representatives who are claimed to represent the people are too concerned about their legacy and dismiss us, we need a third party that actually may represent the needs and desires of people, the liberties of people, the freedom to live as we choose without fear of repercussions. Mr. Sanders is right. Mr. Sanders is right. Yet, I'm not sure. Well, anyway, I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to listen to some of this. And I know I'm just one among many who are just spouting all kinds of stuff. And to be honest, I'm probably no different than anybody else. And with that said, thank you.